We are writing in the year of our Lord 1673 because Christ's birth decisively interrupted time. In the Christian worldview, time has a beginning, creation, and an end. It serves the economia, God's plan of salvation. Humanity and the cosmos have a meaningful purpose. The birth of Christ sheds new light on the past and future. Many events in the Old Testament are seen as prefigurations of those in the New Testament. For example, when Moses raised a bronze serpent on a staff to free the children of Israel from a plague of snakes, this was a prefiguration of the crucifixion of Christ. All events in God's plan of salvation are both temporal and eternal. Therefore, the Virgin Mary was often depicted carrying God the Father and his crucified Son in her womb. For the crucifixion was already foreseen from eternity when she carried the child. Sometimes Mary also carries images of her own life in her womb. Gioacchino da Fiore, 12th century, divided time not into two, before and after the birth of Christ, but into three major periods: the age of the Father, Old Testament; the age of the Son, New Testament; and the new, now dawning age of the Holy Spirit. In this latter age, the visible organization of the Church was to be replaced by the contemplative monastic orders. The text of the Bible was no longer to be understood literally, but symbolically, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. The Aztecs believed in a linear time that arose from the struggle of the four Tetzalcoatlus for supremacy. History is thus divided into 5 suns. We live in the last solar period, which will end with the final destruction. In the center, Omoteotl, Father, Mother, Lord of Time. In the corners around him, the 4 Tetzalcoatlus. At the very top right, the 5th period of our own, our last time. Evolution. Probable stages in the ancestry of humans. Probable, yes. Over 1100 million years have passed since the first life arose on Earth. All life is bound by time. Today, we can roughly trace its evolution from plant to human. Generations die out, and mutations in the genetic code create new ones. But every single plant and animal also has its own temporal form. From seed to the end of its life, it develops step by step in a process of becoming and passing away. The stages of human life also follow this law, but they also consciously experienced as phases of psychological transformation. This is the individuation process for us, through which we experience our unique becoming whole, while we first grow physically and then disappear again into the unknown from whence we came. The 7 ages of man. Stages of human life. Time as rhythm. Matter is in a constant state of transformation. Particles are created, perform their dance, and disappear again. Some live for only a fleeting moment, others combine and create longer lasting forms. Most forms of energy possess a rhythmic aspect, and rhythm generates measurable time. A widespread life rhythm is dictated by the position of the sun, the circadian rhythm of day and night. Most flowers open at or shortly before sunrise. The activity and sleep phases of animals are also aligned with the sun. There are not only daily circadian internal life rhythms, but also lunar-oriented ones, such as the woman's menstruation, and there are also annual rhythms, such as the migration of birds. The bird is a being in which the dimension of time is particularly richly filled with changing life content, with transformations of structure and action, and extreme temporal form. Hormonal secretion and other metabolic processes are controlled by biological clocks. Humans also possess biological clocks, which control the rhythms of metabolism, activity, etc. The main regulator appears to be the brain, with its various internal rhythms. Processes in the cerebral cortex require a minimum of half a second, 70 milliseconds. Our sense of sight perceives a sequence of images of 16 to 18 images per second as a process. Our ear hears a tone when 18 sound waves per second reaches. This is what we describe as experiencing a moment. Humans could be described as multifaceted living clocks, especially in dance and music. We express the rhythmic structure of our being in art forms that are connected to time and give it meaning. Time measurement through rhythms. The rhythmic structure of time inspired humankind to invent the pendulum, which was first used to power the other machines, although Leonardo da Vinci and others had already considered using it for horology. It was Galileo who first attached the pendulum to a clock escapement. Based on this, Christian Huygens developed the model of the isochronous pendulum. When such a pendulum oscillated on the arc of a cycloid, a wheel line, its period of oscillations was constant, independent of the amplitude. This is a combination of sundial and mechanical clock. The dial features a movable astrolabe. In the 18th century, a pendulum was added. Today, we measure time more precisely through the oscillations of piezoelectric quartz, ammonium molecules, barium titanate, calcium, or other substances. Even more precise are master clocks, microwave amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. For industrial purposes, time is measured by so-called shakes of 0.01 microseconds. Certain radar instruments are accurate to a millisecond, 0.1 shake. Necessity and chance. For the Greeks, the means of time were the chains of the universe. What the East called karma was, in the West, the natural law of cause and effect. At the root of the concept of causality lies the Greek goddess Nemesis, or necessity, also called Dike, justice, or Hymer celestial compulsion. In quantum physics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle has supplanted the strictly deterministic view, yet causal thinking still largely dominates our sciences. The complement to causality is chance. The ancient Greeks saw in Kairos, opportune moment, a winged god whom one had to seize quickly by the forelock. He holds the balance on the knife's edge, the movement of which decides fate. He often has wheels on his feet. In this Renaissance mural, chance is depicted as an opportunity for salvation. Virtue prevents the imp from seizing the chance. Here it is not virtue, but the tyranny of time that prevents the man from seizing the opportunity. His opportunity, for time is necessity, the relentlessness of human calculations, which is governed solely by causality. Fortuna, with her wheel of time, is a blind goddess who leads some people to success and others to misery. She turns the human time wheel, which stops when one rises from the grave. Interruptio. While in pre-Christian times the Moai, or Fates, spun the thread of fate, here the Virgin Mary, Queen of the Universe, holds the thread of human destiny in her hands. The mysterious moment, when a battle or a combat game tends towards victory, is the goddess Nike, Victory, daughter of the Styx. She is winged, and all must obey her melody. Based on the principle of synchronicity, humans everywhere have attempted to predict future events through divination techniques. The Qing Oracle, with its groups of 3 broken and unbroken lines, is particularly relevant for divination of the 8 Kuan, or Kua. At the top is a drawing of the so-called fire times from the Kua of the Chao, Chan, Chung Chai Va Hui, explanations of the relationship of the 3 to the Book of Changes. 30 lunar phases, 5 for each trigram or Kua, in mirror symmetry to the older pre-earthly celestial order. In the inner circle, the Kua are grouped in 9s. The Kua represent the fundamental rhythms of the universe. Compasses bearing these symbols were also used for divination. A Western parallel to the Qing is geomancy, in which randomly given points were multiplied 4 times to a remainder of 1 or 2. This resulted in 16 possible combinations. These had symbolic meaning and were plotted in the house of a horoscope with 4 in the center. Other number games were also used for divination. Certain forms of chess and the board game. Immortals use them to determine fate, and shamans use them to explore the future. Shamans with a low power game. The Fon, who lived in the area of the present-day Republic of Benin, West Africa, incorporated geomancy into a profound system. The signs were considered the roots of the universe. John Horton Conway invented a game of life to simulate the rise and fall of the populations. The rules are as follows. A ball in the square survives if 2 or 3 neighboring squares are also occupied. A ball is removed, that's death, if there are more than 3 or fewer than 2 balls in its neighborhood, overpopulation or isolation. A ball may be placed in a square if exactly 3 neighboring squares are occupied. While everything seems mathematically determined, the element of chance lies in the choice of what the balls are supposed to represent. The scheme also fails to account for the diversity of natural conditions. In my opinion, this is more of a game of divination than a scientific instrument. The diagram shows the fate of a set of 3 balls in Conway's game of life. The first 3 groups die out after the second generation. The fourth remains stagnant. The splinter enters a continuous oscillation. Examples of an oracular sign. A sign referring to incest between the gods. Beyond time, the Australian Aborigines know of the phases of cosmic existence they call Ajira, dream time. At that time, great mystical beings roamed the earth and shaped the world. Then they withdrew to the afterlife. But Ajira is still the realm from which the souls of newborns come and to which the dying go. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the temporal world will come to an end. In the book of Revelation, a vision of the Last Judgment, the destruction of the world and the return of Christ is revealed. The subsequent new creation, the heavenly Jerusalem, is timeless and eternal. Even in our Western tradition, a timeless afterlife exists. Countless folk tales describe how a man spends an evening in an elf-hill or in the underworld, and upon his return discovers that he has been gone for hundreds of years. Rip Van Winkle played skittles with giants one evening, and upon his return had become an old man. Dante beholds the city of God, while ordinary people still suffer in this world. Who will hold their fluttering heart still and bring it to a standstill, so that it may but grasp a little of the splendor of ever-continuous eternity, and compare it with ever-continuous time, and recognize that they are incomparable. Therefore, eventually, whatever concretely exists, whether past or future or present, whether inside or outside, everything concrete should in reality be considered in the light of perfect knowledge. This is not me. Thus is described one who has removed the obstacles, filled the trenches, one who has destroyed everything, who is free, whose struggle is over, who has laid down his burden, who is absolved. The yogi transforms his body into the cosmos. His mystical body becomes the microcosm, and he transcends time by harmonizing himself with the great cosmic time. His inhalation corresponds to the path of the sun, his exhalation to that of the moon, the two spiral lines. Then he holds his breath completely and concentrates his energies at the center. Then he transcends the time-bound world. He has become a Java Mukta, one liberated in his life who no longer lives in time, but in an eternal present. Now, considering what we've been talking about there, it's worth a while looking at this space-time, or space and time. If we'll just go rather obliquely first to Finnegan's Wake. From it you will notice a shot upon my far for the first remarking. You that the psephology of Bitchin, while driven as under by a purely dime urge, is not without his cash characteristics. Shot that refers to Scott Moncrief, the English translator of Proust's A la Recherche du Temps Perdu, In Search of Lost Time. Apart from the Bergsonian psephology of Bitchin, several references are made to Proust. With the lost time, we have had our little research brush with what shot? That is from elsewhere in the wake. Sophologia, Greek, the study of wisdom, wise speech. Bergson, French philosopher, attacked by Wyndham Lewis in Time and Rested Man. Lewis was, of course, anti-Semitic, and Bergson was, of course, Jewish. Lewis said James Joyce was of the time school of Bergson, Einstein, Stein, and that's Edith Stein, and Proust. Bergson had said that the intellect spatialized things. It was that spatialization that the doctrine of motion and mental time attacked. The time urge, by the way, the demiurge, God in the creator in Platonic philosophy. Henri Louis Bergson, philosopher associated with the concept of duration, subjective non-linear time, because we've just been discussing linear time. He was the intellectual battleground of the 1920s. There were actually long queues to wait to see him in his lectures. He was, for a philosopher, he was a bit of a star in his day. Wyndham Lewis, writer, painter, critic, anti-Semite, snob, all-round bad egg, in Time and Wasted Man, targeted Bergson, Proust, James Joyce for what he saw their dangerous and effeminate obsession with flowing subjective time, which he believed undermined objective reality. As opposed to the temporalists, fluid time, introspection, etc., he was, one might say, a spatialist, concerned with concrete, quantifiable space, the stable, physical, masculine world. He rejected the subjective medium of time in favor of objective, measurable space. Although Joyce did get his comeback on Lewis in Finnegan's Wake, so make sure you don't get on the wrong side of a great writer, otherwise you may find yourself in their work, and not in a good way. So, are you a temporalist or a spatialist? Is it possible to do one or the other? Okay, this may sound like a bit of a leap. The phenomenology of spirit. where he's discussing force and understanding. But we don't need to go into all of what's going on here. Just the basic point about time and space. There is still another form, because he's distinguishing between form and content in this section, and then that just indicated in which the indifference of law and force, or of notion and being, is to be found. In the law of motion, for example, it is necessary that motion be split up into time and space, and again into distance and velocity. Thus, since motion is only the relation of these factors, it, the universal, is certainly divided into its own self. But now these parts, time and space, or distance and velocity, do not themselves express this origin in a one. They are indifferent to one another. Space is thought of as able to be without time, time without space, distance at least without velocity, just as their magnitudes are indifferent to one another. Since they are not related to one another, as positive and negative, and thus are not related to one another through their own essential nature, the necessity of the division is thus certainly present here, but not the necessity of the parts, as such, for one another. But it is just for this reason that the first necessity, too, is itself only a sham, false necessity, for motion is not itself thought of as something simple, or as a pure essence, but is already divided. Time and space are in themselves its independent parts or essences. Of distance and velocity are modes of being or ways of thinking. Either of ways can well be without the other, and motion is therefore only their superficial relation, not their essence, if it is to be thought of as a simple essence or as force. Motion is no doubt gravity, but this does not contain these differences at all. So, the law of motion, it is necessary that motion be split up into space and time. Space, as against time, is in essence correct here, but it is not like positive and negative electricity. There's a necessity to the splitting up of them. It is necessary that motion, insofar as it is understood in terms of physical phenomena, be split into space and time, and then into distance and velocity. It is necessary that the law of motion express itself in these two different ways, and they are not opposed, because motion is only the relation of these factors. The universal is divided in its own self. The force of motion is expressed in terms of these factors and their interrelationships. We may formulate the equations to give us necessity as the universal is divided, but then these parts, time and space, distance and velocity, do not in themselves express this origin as electricity does, because the positive and the negative are both like parts of the whole. They are opposed to each other. Time and space, they don't necessarily have to be opposed to each other. And time and space do not. We can think of time without necessarily thinking of space. There are, of course, particular theories of time where time is directly connected with space. But insofar as we're thinking in the abstract, we can think of the passage of time without thinking of space. Suppose we're all living in the Red King's dream. Alice in the Looking Glass, where the Red King is busy dozing away, and they're all afraid of waking up in case they are in a dream that he is having, and they will all cease to exist. In his dream, time passes for the subject in the dream. Time passes, but there is no spatiality, albeit it may seem otherwise. As we dream, it may seem that we are in space, but we are not. There's no space in dreams. We can conceive of time as separate from space, and of space as separate from time, a static universe in which nothing ever happens, nothing changes. The understanding can apprehend this, and so for time and space, and distance and velocity, in practice their magnitudes are indifferent to one another. They are not related to each other through their own essential nature. I would like to thank Marie Louis Franz for her inspiration As I'm sure she was the inspiration, and I know she was the inspiration too, in many ways, for the great Carl Jung.